Hello, FLI here once again. Welcome to the practical session for the information security class. This is the second lecture, and from the previous class, I gave students an exercise to do. They was to go online and download the Oracle VirtualBox software, install it on their computer. Then from there, we will install some virtual machines, three different virtual machines. Windows XP, Windows 7, and Ubuntu. Those that have very good computers were supposed to install Windows 10. And possibly we will talk about the Kali Linux. That probably will be the last video that we will talk about. Now, the idea of setting up these computers in the virtual environments was to aid in the sharing of information. When you talk of networking, the main idea of networking is the sharing of resources. The resources can be in the form of data, files, hardware devices like printer and all of that. So in a case like that, we can have a printer and all these computers connected to that particular printer. That is the essence of networking. Now, we will not be able to talk to each other until we have what we called a server or maybe a router or maybe a wireless access point. You know, we need to have set devices in place to be able to uniquely identify each of these computers on the network. Now, for the purposes of this class or this particular practical, we're going to install a firewall. The firewall is more or less in this aspect. It's going to also be a server, and it's also going to serve as a router and a DHCP server. So the DHCP service will be running on this. The whole idea of a DHCP server is DHCP stands for Dynamic Host Control Protocol, is to automatically assign IPs onto each of these computers. So by assigning an IP to XP, Windows 7, and Windows 10, each of them will be uniquely identified on the network. Now, let me bring in here this picture. So from this picture, sorry, let me come back again. Let me bring out the picture. Yes, so from this picture, ideally, in setting up a network, you need to have a hardware, which could be a server, which can also be a router. I will explain each of them as we move along. It could also be a firewall. So we have all these computers connected to this computer. So in that case, this one is able to talk to this one. And depending on the configuration that is set up here, this computer can also talk to this one. Now that is one aspect of a local area network. Now we can also have another one which looks just like this one. So we have an internet and we have a router. A router is more or less a device that has most of the time two network cards, one for the internal network and one for the external. Now the internal network are the ones the internal network are the ones that is found on your local area network. Then the external is the one that goes onto the internet. So all the computers, so the port which goes onto the internet is the external one. And all the computers and devices that you see here, the client computers that you see here, are all on a local area network. So if this phone or this laptop would want to go onto the internet, it first of all would have to pass through the final router or the main router which has access to the internet. So because they are all linked on a local area network, their IP addresses would have to now be routed, or moved from one network to another, which is the internet, to be able to have access to the internet. So from here we have the router, which has one port connected to the internet, other ports connected to the local area network. And from this side, you can see we have a wireless router, which is more of a hub over here. So this falls under the local area network of this router, and this also falls under the local area network of this router. So from here, because this is also a wireless network card, it also has two network interface. So the local area network for this router will eventually form as the external connection to a different network. Now, this router will also have an internal connection, which is the local area network. So the devices under this local area network are the ones that you find over here. So for this computer to be able to talk to maybe a computer here, you can see these are two networks, two local area network. This is one local area network. This is another local area network. This is also another area local network. So for this computer to be able to talk to this computer, you first of all would have to be on the local area network of this computer. Then the router or the hub which is here would now move the information that wants to be sent to probably this computer to the second network card, which is in this case this one, this particular cable, which is the external aspect of this one. And when it gets here, it is also the internal for this router. And because this internal and this internal are of the same level, this one can also talk to this particular one. So the information will come here to the external and now to these ones. Now we'll explain all of this as we go along. Um, but for now, I would want you to just have a basic idea of what this is about. All right, so just have this set up in mind. That is what we are going to do. We are setting up a local area network. Then later on, I have internet access so at home, so I would put it up online so you see how you can also connect to the internet, how each of these computers will be able to connect onto the internet. All right, so this is the interface of the Oracle Virtual Machine or the VirtualBox Manager, and all this interface is the one that is going to manage all the virtual computers that we have set up here. If you recall, I showed you that these are the ones that I already have in here. Now I have I have Ubuntu 20, that is the version 20 set up in here. I have XP and Windows 7 also set up here. I have all these ones running. These ones are not running. So now let me quickly move on to each one of them so that you can see what I'm talking about. So this is the Windows 7. So this is the Windows 7. I have it running in here. Let me go to Windows XP. This is also Windows XP. I don't know if any of you ever use Windows XP. It's one of the fastest operating system that I know of, mainly because the kind of resources that or information that help boost or boots this one, it's quite slow. It's not as Windows 7 and or possibly 8 or 10. So it's very fast. I usually use it for most of my experiments. Yes, so this is Windows XP. Now I also have the Ubuntu. I'm sorry. I also have the Ubuntu operating system over here. Now from here you can see it says connection field. I don't have any network connection in here. So I don't have access to the internet. Neither do I have access to talk to any of the computers that I showed you. If I come to Windows XP, you can see there is no connection in here. You can see there is no activity, no packets sent, neither do I have packets received. Going back again to Windows 7, you can see it's also not connected. You are familiar with some of these things. So yes, so now the next thing I would want to do is to come back again to the Oracle VirtualBox Manager. Now I would want to create a new computer. And this new computer, which is the virtual computer, is going to serve as the firewall. So, and it's going to serve as a firewall. It's going to serve as a DHCP server. It's going to serve as a router as well. So making it as a router means we would have it's able to move us from one network to the other to have internet access or maybe be on a wide area network. So now let me set up another computer from here. So I'll start by going to machine. I'll say new. Then I'm going to call it let's say a firewall. It could be any name. I'm going to call it firewall. So this operating system is a free BSD software or firewall, which I'm going to install. Now there are lots of firewalls that are available. Um, we can have SensorNet, even your Windows server can also serve as a firewall. It can also serve as a router. It can also serve as a DHCP server. And by DHCP server, it means it's able to give out IPs to all computers. I'm believing some of these terms have been spoke about in the datacom communication class. So when I talk about IPs and the rest, I'm sure you are familiar with them. If I say a class A IP or a class B IP and the rest, I'm sure you are familiar with them. You should also probably have an idea of what subnetting is. In fact, this is the basis for cybersecurity or information security related things. Most of the information that we would deal with, or most of the things that we would deal with, will be on the network. So, to be a very good cybersecurity expert, or maybe information security expert, or a network security expert, you should have the fundamentals of networking. You should be able to set up all these things using virtual machines and possibly, using the real world hardware itself. So I'm going to set up a firewall. And this time around, I said there are lots of firewalls available. There are a lot of routers available. I'm going to use what we call the pfSense firewall, which we use on campus. So on the UMAT campus, all the internet access, having to get access to the internet and rest, we use a firewall called pfSense. Now, apart from that, there are certain things that we'll do on the network when we start up with it. So in the meantime, let me get this installed. So I'm going to install a firewall, which will also be a router. So the type is a BSD, which is a free BSD. I'm using a 64 bits. Now I'm going to give it maybe one, let's say 512 memory. Um, I'm going to maintain these ones. So dynamically allocation, I'm going to maintain the default one. So let me give it a little, let's say 20 gig. It's okay. But in the meantime, let me check the size I have on my computer if I have enough space so that I don't crash. I think I have enough so I can create this one. So now I have the firewall machine set up. So it's more or less like I have it bought. I bought the computer. Now I will have to now install the OS onto this computer. But before I do that, most firewalls or routers have two network cards. Most of the computers that we have set up in here, they have just one network card. When you buy a computer from the laptop that you have just one network card installed on it. But if it is a server or a firewall, usually you have about two network cards. So I'll go to the settings of this one. Then I'll look out for um, under general. These are the basic information that we have talked about. So I'll go to systems. Would I need a CD-ROM for this. This computer does not have a CD-ROM, so I can choose to uncheck this one or leave it just as it is. But this point is what is very important to me. So I would so this is the place where you install the operating system. So I'm going to load the the optical discs which I have on my computer somewhere. I think let me see. I have it somewhere here. Let's see. I think it's under downloads. Yes, so this is it. pfSense. In fact, I'm going to load this software on the VLE class so that you can download it and use. But those that want the latest version, you can always go online and download it. I think this is the latest version. So I have it selected. Um, so I'll go back again and start and boot the virtual computer. I'll start the virtual computer. So we have the virtual machine started. So this is the pfSense, the firewall that we use on campus. Of course, I said there are other variants. We have virtual, we have SensorNet, which is also a firewall. We have within Windows Server 2008 can act as a firewall, and also a router as well. So you can see it's running. The firewall is running. Let me go into it's a full screen mode. Yes, so this is how it looks like. Let me see. All right, so now this is the first interface that you see. pfSense, the copyright, whatever, you can read all of this. Now you should be careful that the moment you right click on inside this one, your mouse vanishes. And the only way to relieve your mouse is to press control, the right control on your keyboard, not the left control. The right control on your keyboard, you press it once and the mouse will appear. So I'll click inside again so that I'll have access to the pfSense installer. Now by default, you have it says A is for accept, so I'll press on A or I'll just press enter. Now we want to install this firewall, which is the pfSense, on the computer. We don't want to always run it from the CD or the ISO file that you saw me link with. So I'll click on install. So I'll click, in fact, I'm going to use the default settings that is found in here. I'll say okay to this one. The default disk that was allocated was 16 gigs. So if you want to reduce it, you can reduce it as well. pfSense does not really consume a lot of space. It's because the FreeBSD, the file system is quite small, unlike Windows. Those that saw the ISO file, it was around 680 megabytes. Now Windows most of the time is around 2 gig or 3 gig, sometimes even 4 gig. All right, so this is the installation of the pfSense firewall. In fact, I just want you to have a practical idea of the Datacom class. I don't know. I spoke to Mr. Akpa if if you've done anything like the lab session 1 or 2, if you've done something related to networking, and they said you guys have not done this, so I felt it necessary to incorporate into this. And of course, we will need to have a network to be able to work with um, the information security class. Yes. So the installation is now finished. Before exiting the installer, would you like to open a shell in the new system to make any final manual modification? We'll say no to this. We will not do anything in here. So now we'll have to find a way to reboot the system. So we'll reboot it. Then quickly, I would want us to press Control to come out of it. Then I'm going into the firewall, the virtual machine manager. I'm going to settings. Let me see. Under under storage, I don't want this one to appear, so I'm going to remove it so that it will not boot from the CD as it did from before. All right, so let me go back again. So the pfSense firewall is shutting down. So this is more of a good server that is going to help us give IP addresses to the three computers that we have in here. That is the Windows XP, Windows 7, and Ubuntu. So because this software would give a dynamic host control protocol, that is a DHCP IP addresses to these computers for them to be able to talk to each other or have access to the internet more or less. Okay, so still on this one, you can see let me just all right, let me just manually restart it. I'll press Control again. Your case, you just let it run after you restart it. So in my case, I'm going to just power it off from here and start thinking. So I'll come back again to the manager and I'll start the pfSense. Okay, so it's booting this time round. You will leave it to boot, you will not touch anything. You should be mindful that at this point I've removed the drive C or the ISO file. So it's not booting from the ISO, it's booting from the computer itself. It's booting from the hard disk. Let me pause it so that it's finished. When it gets to the last point, I continue. All right. So at this point, you can see from here that do VLANs needs to be set up first. We don't want to do these stuff. We'll talk about them later on. Now you can see from here that we have just one network card. It says should VLAN be set on this setup now? We will say no to this. So I'll say no. I'll click inside and press N for no. Now enter the WAN interface. That is a wide area network interface name. For this one, I'm going to halt over here and restart and do some basic configuration and restart this again. So that you see, we would have two network cards on this. Because the router, we need to have two network cards. The WAN, which is the wide area network, and the LAN, which is the local area network. So I'm going to power it off. That's the same way. Let's close it and say power off machine. And I'll show you some basic configuration in here. Now, from here, you can from the firewall, when I come to settings, at this point, you can see I said every router or every router should have two network cards, just like how you saw this from this picture. These wireless routers, the wireless router that you see here, this router, there's also a wireless router. This is Linksys. This wireless router has one network card, network ports, which is connected to the internet, and another other network ports, which is connected to the local area network, so that we can move information from the local area network to the internet. That's the only way. We need to have a router. But in our case, our router is not a physical hardware, it's a software which we are using. And that is the pfSense. It serves as the router, it serves as a firewall, it serves as a dynamic host control protocol, which will give us an IP addresses to each of these computers or devices that we have on the network. So a router should always have two network cards so that we will have the local area network information moved from that network to the wide area network, which is the internet in our case. So I'll close this one and I'll come back again. Now, when we come to network, you can see at the moment I have adapter one, that is one network card, and it is using NAT. So I would want us to change this particular network card to our host network card. So I'm going to use the host only adapter. So in this case, if I have internet on my computer, I can have another internet access on this particular server too as well. That is the host adapter. Now I want us to also have another network card. So to do that, I'll just check on this one. It activates this network card for me. So it means I now have two network cards. Now this network card, I'm going to use um, this one, internal network. And when I say internal network, it means I want to set up um, a local area network. I can call it LAN. I can call my internal network LAN, local area network. Or, so it means this particular network port will be linked to the internal network, not to the external. This one will be my external. And I'm saying my external is going to be the same as my computer. I can as well use a NAT and select the network card that I think has internet access. But this time I'm just using my host only adapter. So whichever um, access I have on the internet, I can use this one to do that. If you want more network cards on your router, you can keep adding them by checking the enable. But for the purposes of this one, pfSense serving as the router and also the network ports, I would just use two network cards. So I'll say OK to this one. Then I will start the firewall all over again. So I'll minimize this for the firewall to start booting. Okay, so you can see it's booting. So we leave it to finish booting. So at this point again, we have our ISO file already removed. So it is booting directly from the hard disk of the virtual machine. Okay, so it keeps booting. All right, so you can see pfSense in here. Welcome pfSense. All right. So this software it's works in the command line interface. So most of the basic configuration that we will do will start from the command line interface. Um, then later on, we'll move on to the graphical user interface of this particular firewall. And the only option to get into the graphical interface is to use the web browser. So I will explain that as we move along. All right, so you can see from here, it says, welcome to pfSense 2.4 and the wide area network. I'm saying pfSense is a firewall. It can also serve as a router, and routers have two network cards. So we have the one network card, which is taking up an IP of 192.168.56.this, and it's a DHCP version 4, DHCP, meaning it is picking an IP address directly from the host computer, and it's on a /24. From your datacom class, when you say a /24, what it means is we have a total of 24 bits. And if you have a 24 bits, then there's a likelihood of you having about 254 hosts and about 256 network addresses that are available. So the hosts are the ones that have access that can be connected onto the network. The first and the last IPs, that is the two, are the ones that are meant for um, the network, and the other one for the broadcasting. So on the /24, you have about 255, let's say 56 hosts, 56 net IP addresses, but the only usable ones are 254 because we have the last two, the first and the last IPs being used for the network and also for broadcasting. Now we can see I also have a local area network over here, and this is also assigned to EM1. That is the network card name that is given to this. And it's also using the IP version 4, and this is the IP address 192.168.1.1. So that is to so this is the local area network. So all computers that we see on our network should have access to the local area network, and they should be on the IP 192.168.1.1. I've already told you this is also a /24. If it's a /24, means 256 network IPs and 254 hosts. Now I would intentionally would want to change the IP address. Let's forget about the one because you are taking information on the internet from the internet that we have on the host computer, not the virtual computer. So first of all, I would want to set this up by going into it. So the numbers that you see here are what's the options that you have available to get it set up. So now I want to change maybe this IP address from 192.168.1.1 to 1.3, or maybe 1.254. So I would first of all go to the option that I see is option 2. Option 2 says set interface IP address. So I'll select 2. I'll press enter. So now it is asking me which of the network interface do I want to set up the IP address. This is the number 2, because I want to set up an IP for the local area network, which is going to be the IP address of the server internally for all the internal networks to pass through and go onto the internet. So I'm going to set it up. I'll say 2, which is the LAN. Then I'll enter the new IP address which I want, 192.168.1. I'll say 254. This is the IP address I want to use for this. Press enter. Now it is asking me of the subnet. It says subnet marks are entered in bits. So on a /24, you have a subnet to be 255.255.255. That is how come we have 24. Now, when you convert 255 to binary, you get 1111 8 of ones, which is served as the first octet. 8 of ones again, 7 as the second octet, 8 of ones again, 7 as the third octet. So if you add um 8, 8, 16, 8, 24, that is how come we have 24 plus 24. When we say slash 16, then it means you have 16 bits. When we say slash 8, we have 8 bits. So each of them have there is a calculation for knowing the number of hosts or usable IPs that are available. So I'm sure in Datacom class this has been taught. So I'll just hit on them as we go along. Now, if we are in an organization that is made up of about 200 computers or 200 clients or hosts on the network, then it is best to use a slash 24. But if we have an organization that has thousands of um, hosts or clients on the network, then we would have to rethink and um, get a new subnet. These are just some default subnets. You can have a slash 22. You can have a slash 20, a slash 18 for your subnets and all of that. So in this case, I'm going to use a slash 24. So I'll just type 24. Of course, we have slash 31 too as well. We can also, we have slash 32, we have slash 28. So when we talk about slash 28, you should know the number of usable IPs that are available. So this one we have 255, 256. So now I've entered the IP address. I've entered a new subnet mask. So it says for one, enter the new LAN. No, for LAN. All right. So this is we are not setting the one. We are setting the LAN. So I'll just forget about it and press enter again. We are not using IP version 6. We're still using version 4. So I'll press enter again. It says, do you want to enable DHCP server on the network, on the local area network? I would say let us activate the DHCP server. Now, when we activate the DHCP server, it means this server is now going to give IP addresses to our computer. To our computers, the XP, the Windows 7, and the Ubuntu. So I'm going to say yes, and I'll press enter. Then now it is asking me the start address of the client's IP address. You know, we've already given an IP address for this server to be 192.168.1.254. So if we want some client's computer, let's say we have about 100 clients to be on our network. We have about 100 computers on our network. Then we can set up the starting point of the IP and the ending point of the IP. So in this case, I'm going to say the range I'm going to use is starting from 192.168.1 dot, let's say 20. So it will start giving IP addresses from IP number 20. Then I will enter the end IP address, which is also 192.168.1 dot, let's say 700. So let's say 120. You should be mindful that I have one here, one here. So meaning these each computer, these networks are on the same local area network. We should be mindful about that. So do you want to revert to the HTTP as the configuration protocol? No, you can say yes or no, but I want us to use the HTTPS version of the web configuration for the pfSense. So I'll say yes. I'll say no to this one, and I'll press enter. Now it is creating the DHCP service for us. So now it is telling us that before we can have access to this particular computer, which is the pfSense, we have to go through our browser and enter this particular IP address, which is 192.168.1.254. That is the IP address of this particular server. So I'll press enter here. All right, so you can see before the IP address was 1.1. Now I've changed it to this I've created a DHCP. So now let's go on to our Windows XP and see if we are connected to the internet, to a network. So from here you can see we are more or less. Let's go to support. Let me. You can see an IP has been assigned to this particular computer. It says one assignment assigned by DHCP, and that is the DHCP server. So we have. Let me try and repair it so that it refreshes. Okay, so we have um, 192.168.1.100. So that is the IP address for this one, for this particular computer, which is the XP. Now, I would want us to go straight to the browser. We were given an IP over here that is the way to access the web configuration portal of this pfSense server, and that is the IP address here. So I'm going to type it in the XP to see the graphical user interface of the pfSense. So I'll go back again to Windows XP, and this time round I'll type https tps // 192.168.1.254. All right. Of course, it's going to tell us it's not secure because the configuration of the HTTPS is not really the right. It's not really configured properly. I'll say advanced, and under advanced, I'll click on add exception. So I'll confirm the exception so that it sees it. So now this is the interface of the graphical user interface of the pfSense firewall router DHCP server. So we have our login by the default username is admin and the default password is pfSense, all small letters. The pfSense that is spelled here. pfSense. All right. So this is the first interface. So this is the interface, the graphical user interface of what you have just of the pfSense. So welcome to pfSense. These are some basic things that you can read. I'll click on next. I'll click on next. In fact, it's an open source firewall um, produced by these people. If you want to have Netgates, produced by Netgates, I think you can see them somewhere. Yes, Netgates, produced by Netgates, as you see here. All right, so it's asking us of a host name. You can say pfSense. We can set up a local domain on our computer. We can say it's a local domain, or somebody can also say, um, um, let's say ce.com. Let's say ce.com. The DNS, the primary DNS, by default, it will pick the default IP that we have. But because we want to set up a good to set up a DNS, we can use the DNS from Google, which is 8.8.8.8. Well, the DNS is very important to be able to go onto the internet, so I'll use the primary DNS as this one. And this also, we will have to set the right time zone. We are in Greenwich Meridian, so we'll use this one. Then we'll go to next. Now we should select on the one interface. What we have here is a DHCP. It's a DHCP because we are running on a virtual machine. But in the physical world, your internet service provider will give you an IP address which you would enter here. So in that case, you select static and you enter the static IP over here. But because we are connected to our virtual machine, I'm using DHCP so that I have an IP from the host computer, which is already on the internet, to give me internet on the wide area network interface that we have. So we have two interfaces, one for the wide area network and one for the local area network. So for the internet aspect, that is the one. So I'll move on. There are certain configurations that we can also do. Maybe later on I would talk to you about these ones, but for now, these ones you can block it. You can also protect your client, um, the CLI, that is the command line interface of the pfSense. You can protect it so that nobody, whoever has a physical access to the computer, will not be able to do some changes like setting up IPs and the rest. Or you can protect it with a password. You can do all of that from. You can do all those settings from here. So I'll move on to the next. Now, the LAN IP address that we set up was 192.168.1.254, as you can see here. The reason I did the configuration in the command line interface was to have internet, was to have the Windows XP or any of those computers access to the network so that I'll be able to come into the browser and configure it properly. So from here, if you think you want to change the IP address of the pfSense server, you can just change it in here. But I'm going to maintain what is there. If you want to change the subnet, you can also change the subnet. You can do as many things over here, but you are still maintaining 254, mainly because we have about 120, we have about 100 clients, and slash 24 gives us over 100 clients, which is about 256. So ideally, if we want 100, it means we have to do the calculation properly so that we will have exactly 100 or possibly the numbers within that range. So I'll maintain a slash 24. Then this is the password. Initially, the pfSense comes with a password pfSense. If you want to change the password, you type a new password in here. I'm going to maintain what is already there. Then I'll click on reload. And all the changes that I've done will reload from here. So now you can say congratulations, pfSense is now configured. Check for updates. Of course, we can check for updates and do some few things. So I'll click on finish. I'll click on accept. It's still prompting me that the admin password has not been changed. You let me change it. Let me change the password from the default one. So I'll create a new password. It could be any password. And the full name of the systems administrator and all of that, you can set it up. After I will save this one. And I'll remember it so that I don't forget. All right, so now this is the interface of the pfSense. You can see we have the wide area network, which is up, and the IP address is what is given here. Usually, that is the IP address from your um, internet service provider, and the local area network, which is this, is also up. That's why you see it's green up. We have 192.168.1.254. All right, so now on the left side, it says the system is on the latest version. So there's the latest version of the pfSense. Now, this is a very powerful firewall, router, DHCP server. In fact, it does so many things. You can even set up, what do you call it? An intercom on this using this pfSense. So that when my intercom, those that have network phones, we can set it up. Those that have what's 24, they use network phones. The CTU, usually they would use the network phones. The network phone has a network cable connected to it, set up within an organization. So in a room or maybe in an office, you can have a network phone for an entire building using pfSense. And it has what we call the Asterisk. And Asterisk it's a package that you can install in pfSense and do some of these configurations. In fact, there are so many things that you can do with the pfSense software. So this is basically what we have done. Now let's go under services. These are certain things that you can do. Under diagnosis, these are some of the things that is happening. Now I would want us to check the DHCP server. So and look out for the leases, the IP addresses that have been given out so far. So you can see I have, sorry, I think these ones are old IP addresses. Okay, I think they are actually correct. Let me see. Let me see. This is my SP, that is 100. And this is my Ubuntu, which is 101. I was working earlier on using Paidu. That is why you have this. Now let me start. Let me go to, let me try and open the Windows 7 and see if it will also come here. It has to also be online. Paidu cell. I think I use, let me see. Let me go back to Windows 7. Windows 7. Okay, you can see it's trying to, when you connect to a network with Windows 7, this is what happens. This is a home network. So I'll use this one. I'll close it. I don't know why this keeps going because it's a pirated software. It's not activated. Let me change the. Okay, so now we still see this. It says there is no internet access. Let me go back again. So I can go to, let me go to NCPA. That is the network control panel. So let me check the status of this one. Check the details. 192.168. The default DNS is, the default gateway is 1.1. No, I would want us to change it to well, the gateway is where you pass through to the internet. So now let's change the default gateway for our pfSense. But if we do restart all these computer, this computer is supposed to pick the default gateway to be 254, which is the IP address of the pfSense server. So let me go back again to Windows XP. So under interface, these are the interfaces that we have. You can see from here. So this is the default gateway. Okay, let me see if I can browse. Okay, I can't because it's most probably because the default gateway is. Okay, let me see. Okay, this is 254 and the gateway. All right, but first of all, I would want us to now use the ping command in command prompt to see if we can talk to any of the computers. Now from here, these were the computers from the list. These were the computers that were online. 100 is the SP, which is the 101. So now let's see if we can talk to them from here. So let's see. I'll go back again to the command prompt. So let me see. Ping 192.168.1. That's 101, which is the Ubuntu server. You can see I can talk to the Ubuntu server. Now, ping command, what is ping actually stands for packet internet grouper. So what it does is a piece of software that tests all the nodes on the network to make sure that they are working correctly. So if I ping, let's see if I can ping another computer. Let's say ping once 192.168.1 um Pydio cell, that is 101, 102. 2. So I'm able to ping that one too. So it means I'm in this computer, I'm in XP, but I'm able to talk to those ones. So it means these are all connected on the network. Now I'm going to pause this setup and restart all my virtual computers to see if I can have access to the internet.